Hey guys, welcome to the LT Brings the Heat podcast. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler, where we talk about baseball and sports performance. With topics ranging from coaching, business, and player development, our goal is to bring you a no BS approach to development in baseball and sports performance. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's rock and roll. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LT Brings the Heat. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler. We got an episode today that is going to be I'm definitely very biased about. It's a very sensitive subject for me because it ultimately led to me not playing baseball anymore. So I selfishly, talk about this a lot, and I'll just go in the forefront. We're going to talk about baseball players and bench pressing. Basically, should they do it? What type of bench pressing we're talking about? Pressing in general. We're going to stay away from talking about training overhead, and stuff like that. We'll save that for another episode because I do believe in training overhead. And keeping everything strong, getting guys strong in the overhead position, because that's something in the baseball community that is definitely far behind when it comes to the science and the experience in a lot of strength coaches, but also players, because a lot of people think that is taboo. But we'll get to that on another episode. But today is basically just the bench press, and like I said, I tore my labrum my last year of college, so there's some experience, and I'll get to this a little bit as we get going. But there's some experience in this and some issues that I have with it, but also some things I really enjoy when it comes to pressing. But I'm going to go ahead and pass on to you, Adam, and kind of get your, opinion on some things and get what you're thinking and stuff, and kind of roll on your aspect before we get going into some of the science and some of the details behind it.
Yeah, and I'm excited we're doing this episode because I feel like everybody's first question, like when they see people working out, is like, "Hey, man, how much you bench?" And it gets asked a ton, and people start to wonder, like, is bench even good for baseball? Is it not good for baseball? So I feel like this is a very important episode to kind of show what side we're on here, and then our pros and cons from it. And while we're strong believers, I think we're going to really both agree on this, both having shoulder surgeries done on us after we left the University of South Alabama. And so we're going to have some input from ourselves, as well as athletes we trained, as well as maybe some experiences that we've learned from other coaches that are doing the same thing, maybe at their high school or their college program. So we're going to dive in deep to it, see some serious thoughts about how can we maybe supplement this exercise for something else, or maybe there's a way we can do this a different way to still try to get the same results. So I'm excited to touch on this one. But, Sean, I'm going to kind of tee you up here first, and let's just dive straight into it. So baseball players, should we bench press or should we not?
So yes and no. I'm not a fan of barbell bench press, full range barbell bench press for baseball players. And I'll kind of dive into the science and the reasoning behind. But so the bench press is a lat dominant exercise. When we do a bench press, especially the majority of people, the way they teach it in a powerlifting nature, where, big chest, arching the chest, really pull the shoulder blades back and down. And it kind of locks the shoulder blades down. And as people that know baseball, like, we want the shoulder blades to move freely. And the problem with the bench press is it'll kind of create stiff, tight athletes. And, if you're a power lifter, go for it, do it. If you're a football only type guy, which again, football only type guys, they still need to be mobile and stuff. But the bench pressing, you got to be strong in the upper half. For me, when it comes to baseball players, and this is with any athlete and any strength coach or whatever, there's a couple of questions you got to ask yourself when it comes to any exercise in general, risk versus reward ratio. And for me, it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is barbell bench pressing going to have that much carryover to the sport of baseball? And it's basically going to make or break me. And the answer is no. Like, the barbell bench press, do we want to get strong pressing? Yes. Do we want to have strong triceps? Yes. Do we want to have a strong upper body? Yes. Like, all these things are very true, but there are a multitude of ways that you could do this. And like I was mentioning before, let's look at, like, if the shoulder blade is not moving efficiently, let's look at the science and the mechanics and the body right here. If the shoulder blade isn't moving efficiently, that means the humeral head, the shoulder itself, the arm itself, is going to have to increase the range of motion itself. So now you've got, the ball is not in its socket. It's moving around more. Everything around it, like, if we don't have a solid, strong rotator cuff, that humeral head is going to glide around and move around. And then we got to look at guys that are naturally born with hooked acromions. And I believe, like, I haven't been up to date on this, but there's three, types of acromions. And some guys have the flat where the labrum glides nice and smooth. Some guys have a little bit of a curve where the labrum will start fraying. And then some guys have a big curve and that huge hooked acromion where that labrum is fraying. And basically, sooner or later, that labrum will tear up into shreds. And that's, those guys have trouble with throwing as well over time. The labrum starts fraying. And for those that are listening, I was that third guy. I had a hook to chromium, so I was kind of screwed from the get-go with my labrum. I didn't know all this stuff until later on. But essentially, like, I still to this day at 35 years old have issues with my shoulder blades stuck in downward scapular syndrome. And I credit it to a lot of the pulling the shoulders back and the bench pressing and really holding the shoulder blades down and having that firm, stable surface when pressing. So there's a lot of issues I have with this. And the issue is, with baseball players, we need to have good thoracic rotation, thoracic mobility. As I've talked about before, the bench press will kind of take away from that a lot. As baseball players, we need to make sure our scaps are moving up because, the scapular is the shoulder is the scapula. So if I'm throwing overhead, I've got to make sure that scap is moving up with me. Otherwise, I'm sitting here in trouble and I'm setting myself up for injury because of how tight I am on that backside. And it's going to affect the lat. It's going to affect the shoulder capsule. I'm going to get tight in that posterior shoulder, a lot more tightness than usual. There's so many factors that go into it. I literally was having a conversation with one of my Purdue players that I train about his shoulder bothering him. He was like, "Coach, I haven't bench pressed for a long period of time, and our coach had us do 4-range barbell bench press in the middle of the season, and now my shoulder's killing me right now. What can I do?" And so I had to break some things down. I go, "Well, dude, it could be the shoulder bench press. It could have been something that was already aggravating you." And that's the thing is, like, so if we look at this, like, should we bench press or should we not? And it's kind of the answer to everything. I said it depends. Like with certain guys that are football players and baseball players, in the off season, certain times they'll do 4-range barbell bench press, and then I won't have them do it whenever they're throwing or they're doing anything during baseball season. There's a fine line here because, you got your sport coaches that are demanding the squat bench clean in high school, and that's all they want you doing. There's a lot of programs. I see guys on Twitter that are advocating barbell bench press. I know Driveline is a big advocate of 4-range barbell bench press. And I remember them talking about it. I don't know, it was like 5 or 6 years ago, whenever they started first talking about it and about how great it is, strengthening the internal rotators and all this stuff. And from my history as a player, but also as a coach, I just think you're playing with fire when you're going full range barbell bench press. And this is just my opinion. People that are listening can have your own opinion. That's perfectly fine. I said in the beginning, I'm biased about this. It's a sensitive subject for me, but here's the thing. As a strength coach, like we talk about, first and foremost, my job is to keep everybody healthy and then help push their limits, getting them bigger, stronger, faster. Like those two main things. If a guy comes to see me and he gets hurt doing an exercise, that's a problem. If he gets hurt from him, playing around and not taking things seriously, and injuries are part of the game. Sometimes guys get hurt. But if there's a certain exercise that I know has a higher risk of injury, specifically with guys that aren't able to hold technique, aren't able to hold form, that are weak in their core, their shoulder is just moving around, that ball and socket's just moving around like it's just, gumbo, just bouncing around everywhere. Like that's a problem. So for me, in short, we do a bunch of different variations, and I'll get into here soon, but I personally think that there's so many other ways that we can get the upper half stronger. We could strengthen the triceps. We can get stronger at pressing. And we do a ton of variations. It's not to say that we don't use a barbell, but just like with everything in life, it depends. And we've got to be smart in what we're doing and how we're doing things, because at the end of the day, the bench press is not going to make a guy throw harder. It might make some guys throw harder. There might be certain studies and certain things where, guy increased a little bit of velocity. But the bottom line is baseball is a rotational sport. There is no rotation in the bench press. We're moving straight up, straight down. Off of a bench. There is not a correlation to that on the field. There's a ton of other exercises that we utilize that we have got tons of numbers on and data on that correlate to increase in velocity. So when I hear guys say, "Hey, the barbell bench press helps with velocity," I just disagree. It may be a guy that can't walk and chew gums, 110 pounds. He bench presses, increases 20 pounds of muscle or whatever. Maybe he's increased a little bit, but is it from the bench press? Is it because he's getting stronger and increasing weight? Like that's, to me, there's always some flaws with studies when you see that stuff. But before I kind of go into a little bit more of variations and things that we do, Adam, kind of give me your opinion on, with your history, and kind of tell the listeners what you think about the barbell bench press, what your opinions are, and kind of what maybe your opinions changed since college, or maybe your opinion's a little bit different. Like I kind of want to know your aspect of things before we dive in deeper here.
Yeah, and I think my opinion definitely has changed from high school and in college. Like I fell in love with the bench press. Why? Because I was actually pretty good at it, and I worked on that a whole lot more than I worked on other stuff. And in the long run, it didn't help me at all. I don't believe so. Like you mentioned, is the risk versus the reward factor. So both of us, our senior years at South Alabama, we had, like we mentioned before, a new strength coach come in, had been with a lot of the football guys, was with the baseball guys for the first time. We were probably the strongest as a team I feel like we've ever have been, and explosive, but it all of a sudden it like just broke. And with your shoulder getting messed up, my shoulder getting messed up, we had some pictures with Tommy John, we had some other shoulders going on. The risk versus reward wasn't worth it at all. And I think if we all look back and we could go back to those days, we wouldn't do it. And I think a big part of it is just what would a workout regimen look like without the straight barbell bench press? And are we going to lose velocity throwing because I'm not doing it? Or am I going to lose exit velocity because I'm not doing it? I don't think so. So for somebody just to say that, hey, straight bar bench press is going to help you throw harder, I'm not a big believer in it as well. I just don't see how it's going to help. I think maybe you got stronger somewhere else, and that's what's helping you throw harder because you're a part of a regimen and you're getting stronger throughout your body. But I just think it's not worth it. Yeah, it's cool. Everybody wants to talk about it, like I mentioned early on, but it really doesn't help you. I mean, I can't think of anybody that all of a sudden started throwing harder just because they started benching a lot more. A guy I played with in high school was a big fan of the bench press. He was very good at it. He was our strongest player, but his arm was absolutely garbage. And he'll tell you to this day that it was bad. And he used to be at Little League level. He was the hardest throwing kid throughout the park. Everybody knew about it. As 16, 17, 18, he maybe threw 70 miles an hour from the outfield. But you talking about a guy, he ran a 6'5", he was explosive. He hit double-digit home runs. Like, I think he would have played at the next level. He played in college, but I think he could have played in pro ball. But I remember a scout specifically telling him after the school he went to, the D1 he was at, like, your arm is that bad that I can't sign you and send you off to play. I think it really struck home, like, all that time I spent in the weight room, but doing the bench press versus doing other stuff really kind of bit him in the you-know-what. So I think if he had to go back, he would change everything. I remember from a personal experience, after the shoulder surgery, going to Bob Fleming, the physical therapist here in town, basically, hey, how often do you work your back versus your chest? And I was like, well, that's a kind of a weird question. He's like, well, a lot of us always look in the mirror, so we're always wanting to work the front part, but we never want to work the back part. He goes, you need to be doing the back part twice as much as you do the front. He's like, is a bench press ever going to help you besides maybe sliding head first? That's the only reason that you actually need to do this. And it kind of struck home with me. Like, from that point going forward in my rehab process, I dominated scaps. I dominated back of my shoulders, my lats, my whole backside was a whole lot stronger than it ever has been. But it wasn't until a physical therapist basically told me how strong that whole stuff was. So I think if studies are coming out, like you're seeing, there's ways to get around doing this bench press and smart ways to do it. When I was with the White Sox, it was all dumbbell press. There was no straight bar. It was dumbbell press. And one of my favorite ones was single arm dumbbell while you have the other one up at the top of the motion. And then you kind of just work them back and forth while it's trying to keep your core tight. So it helps your mobility. It helps your scaps. Like you said, is very important for moving and throwing in general. So the risk versus reward, it isn't there. So for guys that have fallen in love with the bench press, let's back off of it and fall in love with scapular enhancers. I know it sounds dumb. Like, that doesn't help. Nobody walks up to somebody and says, like, how much do you do on shoulder raises? Nobody says that. So let's kind of take our ego out of it and really just put the bench press to the side and realize in the long run, it's not going to help us get to where we want to be. And that's just both of our opinions. Maybe there's studies out there that are different, but our opinions and being the experiences we had, I just don't see the reward being so much greater than what the risk can be in the long run.
Absolutely. And this is something for people to understand, is if just because you're a baseball player and you're bench pressing and you don't feel pain doesn't mean that there isn't problems that are arising from that. You know, you could be doing an exercise and not feeling pain and creating a multitude of other factors. Like I said before, lat tightness, scapular downward syndrome, you know, your shoulder, your humeral head's moving around because it's making up for lost range of motion that the scap isn't going. There's so many things that can happen from this. So like you were just saying, like scap enhancers, there's so many factors. Like, if you are going to press and what you are going to do, you have got to take care of the little man inside the big man. And what I mean by the little man inside the big man is the lower traps, the upper traps, the shoulder, the rotator cuff, you know, keeping everything stable around that joint. And so I rip on high school strength programs all the time. I feel like I talk about it every episode, but you know, there's programs that literally will bench every single day, or they'll bench every other day. And, they're trying, and while I appreciate the mindset of trying to get as many gains as possible, and they're trying to get 4 years of gains in 1 year, we're looking at the longevity of the players, and we're looking at what the guys can do. We got football players or, wrestlers that can come in and bench press the whole world, but their shoulders are hurting them, and I put a 2.5 pound dumbbell on them, and we do some lower trap work, some YTWLs, some rotator, and they can't even hold it up. They can't even hold it up with no weight in their hands.
Yep.
So that's a problem. If the joint isn't stable, what does the strength matter in the sport? If we're not able to hold a position, physically hold a mobile position, that strength doesn't mean anything. Now we get back and forth, and I won't try to cross between sports too much here, because when it comes to strength and conditioning, we talk about, I'm trying to train guys to be better, stronger athletes. So what do high schools do a lot of? Like I said, squat, bench, clean. So I purposely designed my programs around what they're already going to be doing in high schools. So I'm not going to reinforce, and we're not going to drag on. I'm not going to make the kids bench press a million times. One, I'm not a big advocate of the full range barbell bench press. I get new kids coming in. First and foremost, if a kid can't do a push-up, a young kid can't do a push-up, he's not grabbing a barbell. So if we talk about, alternative exercises, we do a lot of Swiss bar bench pressing. All it does is it brings the elbows in, it puts it in the shoulder in a safer position, allows you to get a full range of motion without feeling like the elbows are flaring out and the humeral head gliding forward. So there's a lot of factors keeping that neutral grip that keeps guys healthy. I have found using that neutral grip and that Swiss bar that, of all these years, knock on wood, we're using that Swiss bar, and we use it. So we'll use it in a middle grip, we'll use it in a close grip, then we'll go down to the floor press and use it in a close grip, use it in a middle grip. And we will use a barbell at times and floor press as well. Now, what I like to do is we rotate exercises. So I'm not spending a long period of time using one exercise, so that exercise, over time beats a guy up. Like, we're mixing things up, we're shocking the nervous system, we're changing, the stimulus. So if we're doing something for 6 straight weeks, we change to do a completely different variation of that exercise in 6 weeks. Now, on top of that, what are some variations that you can do? So we'll work a lot of max effort training with a Swiss bar. We'll do max effort push-ups. We'll do weighted push-ups. So that's a free range of motion. There is a device, the late Charles Poliquin. I don't know if he designed this, but he talked about this thing called the bamboo press. And essentially this bamboo it's not like a bamboo bar from what people like. There's a bamboo bar where it works on stability and there's a lot of oscillation with it, but this is like this rigid, like soft foam thing that attaches to a bench that guys can lay on, and allows their scaps to move freely when they're doing any kind of pressing on a bench with a bar. And I thought that was really awesome. Problem is, I looked it up, and in Europe, it's like $400 from Europe. So they haven't released that. But he was talking about this years and years ago, and to me, it just blows my mind it's not available here. I will invest in that if there's ever an opportunity for us to buy that here in the States. But long story short, with a lot of these baseball players that are coming in, young guys, we train the majority of middle school to high school guys. Our goal is strength. We're got to get them stronger, got to get them stronger, got to get them stronger. On top of that, with a max effort exercise, any other pressing that we do, we are doing fillers around the main exercise, lower trap, rotator cuff, scap enhancers, whatever you want to call them, to take care of the arm. We're doing a ton of wall slides. So anytime we're pressing, we'll do a lot of wall slides to make sure the scaps are moving freely. We do a lot of thoracic spine mobility stuff. So we'll do some internal and external rotation, elbow to sky, quadruped positions as fillers or supersets with the main exercise. On top of that, we're doing a single arm dumbbell bench press. We're doing, weighted push-ups, a barbell push-up, put a barbell on the ground. We're doing push-ups with a barbell on the ground, maybe a standing cable chest press or a standing banded chest press. There's a lot of variations that we throw in to help with the pressing, and you could still train the upper body. We do a lot of, kettlebell walks, overhead walks. We're still working the stability on the front side, still working the stability on the pressing position, kettlebell windmills. I can sit here and talk about this stuff all day long. But the variations that we have are built around making sure that we're not doing this strict barbell bench press, because as high school, that's what they're doing nonstop. Now I get kids that come in and they say, "Hey coach, I'm doing bench press all the time. Is there something I could tell my coach to do instead?" So I say, listen, there's this device, elitefts.com is what it's called. It's a barbell pad, and it shortens the range of motion at school. And I go, if your coach at school is like, "Hey, you need to be doing bench press," you can kind of shorten the range of motion, and it kind of treats it as like a 2 or 3 board press to kind of shorten it so that the elbows don't go all the way down past, your rib cage. And, obviously at that bottom position, that's a lot of times when the shoulders are rolled forward, that humeral head rolls forward, and then you can really grind things up. So I'll tell them to do that. The other option is doing a barbell floor press. Like I said, that we do. We'll do a close grip barbell floor press. Usually on strongman day, we'll do it for high reps, help it kind of increase muscle mass in the triceps right there. But we'll do these variations. I'll tell these kids to do certain things just to keep their arm healthy and keep their arm safe. When I was a strength coach at a high school, I would allow the baseball guys in football season to do full range barbell bench press. In the spring, we wouldn't do that full range. We'd be doing alternative exercises. And the only reason we did that is because the football coach and the kids, they were obsessed with it. I'm like, hey, if you're going to do it, okay, fine, you're going to do it. But we're going to do these type of prehab exercises and stuff around this to try to keep you as healthy as possible. You're making that decision to do it. And I'm sure there's a ton of guys in the MLB that, like, they're meatheads. They want to do full range barbell bench press. But for me, is the juice worth the squeeze? We've got to look at that as the answer all the time. And for us outside at Laird's Training, outside of the school system, we are doing exercises to get guys bigger, faster, stronger. But we're doing exercises that are completely different than what most high schools are doing, because like we said before, that conventional wisdom of doing the same old exercises over and over and over, like, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah, that's true. But also science has gone such a long way, and we see all the problems that, that doing nothing but squat, bench press, power clean and deadlift can go into. We do those exercises, but we do those in different stints. We rotate exercises. We focus on the mobility and the stability before we work on increasing the weight from there.
Yeah, and there's a couple of key things that stuck out to me there was when you were mentioning how important it is for your grip on a bench press and how you have the one bar that basically sets your arms and sets your elbows for you, because I don't remember being taught how to bench press basically. Usually it's just get under the bar, grab it, and find a way to get that thing up. So now you're thinking about how many kids are out there putting too much weight on that know they can't handle it, and their elbows are just flaring straight out, or their wrists are not locked in a good position, or or they have the big gap between the bench and their back where they're bowing their back out. Like, there's so many instances that just keep coming back to my brain. Like, holy crap, so many kids are doing this stuff the wrong way. And another key point was maybe you're not feeling it now, but down the road, it could happen. Like, you're doing injury to yourself without even realizing it. So now it's just trying to be smart about it and get a way around it. All those things Sean just mentioned, like those ways to get the same thing out of what you're trying to look out of is getting strong upper half with your triceps, shoulders, chest, whatever it is, but without the wreckage that's going to come with the bench press, so to speak. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm also glad you mentioned about having kids come up to you and ask you about maybe how to adjust this at their program at their high school, because once we know that all those guys, and a lot of the times I think the baseball coaches are running their strength class, so they don't want to become known as, oh, he's a pansy, he doesn't like to lift. He's telling me he's too good to bench press. So what's the best way to kind of interact back and forth and get around this thing? And I'm glad you brought up the board press, because that was something I felt helped out versus, okay, we're still going to have to do the straight bar. Coach isn't going to let me change that. So I'm going to get a board press, or I'm going to get the device you had mentioned. That way I'm not getting that full all the way down to my chest and going. And so you're not doing as much damage to yourself. So that's a lot of good information, man. I'm excited we were able to do this one, because I just think in hindsight, it's 2020, and looking back, if we both had the option of doing it or not doing it, we both would have went the whole other direction of, and instead of doing this, let's go spend more time doing this and actually going to keep me on the field, staying healthy, keep me throwing, keep me not from going under the knife and having surgery. And like we say, not everybody out there, I don't want you to listen to this and think, oh crap, they're saying if I bench press, I'm going to have surgery on my shoulder. We're not saying that, but we do both feel like in our brains that over time we did damage to our shoulder. Sean mentioned earlier before we came on, he physically felt almost a pop in the fall process when we were doing our maxes out on our bench press. And very well that could have happened. Mine, I felt like, was more of a breakdown over time, where literally one day the pain got so bad in my shoulder from throwing, I couldn't throw anymore. But maybe it was all the bench press I was doing in my previous years that had finally caught up to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the takeaway that the listeners, you guys have to understand, or parents or coaches. And, here's the thing. In the weight room, if you're a coach in the weight room, or, you're helping your son, you're pressing, you've got to understand, like, if there are regressions and progressions to exercise in the weight room for beginners to advanced guys, you're kind of doing a disservice. You are doing a disservice to your children and to your athletes if you don't have variations for certain certain sport athletes. Like the program can have a template, and you can have a template in the program, and everybody can do 80 to 90% of it. But there's certain things that we have to be aware of more of, like, football players, we're trying to take care of the neck. We're trying to prevent concussion. So that's going to be more of a factor than with baseball players. Baseball players, we're going to work on, hey, the rotator cuff. We're going to work on keeping the shoulder healthy, keeping the elbow healthy. We might do some extra rice bucket finishers at the end other athletes can do. It's not, and like I've said before, that's not sport specific strength training. That's specific to the athlete. You've got to take care of the athlete. The athlete has to work on all those things. And if it was in a perfect world for 2 straight hours, we would do every prehab exercise in the world at the end of every workout and before every workout for all athletes, and it would benefit everybody, keeping everybody healthy. And you don't listen to this and go, oh man, Laird and Heisler think we're gonna tear everything up, like you just said. Like, listen, understand that with whatever exercise you're going to do, there is a risk of an injury, especially if you're doing it over and over and over, especially if you have bad technique, you're doing things improperly, you're not listening. And that's the thing, is like, you see kids like, oh, it's, I'm in high school now, I guess I should be bench pressing. They just grab the bench press and they start going with absolute zero knowledge and zero understanding of why you're doing it, technique, leg drive, using everything. Hey, maybe I should be doing some, scapular movement stuff and some mobility work, some thoracic spine mobility work with the bench press, so I don't get locked down and I'm not this stiff athlete. So I actually have something that actually applies to my sport and I can actually physically get in certain positions. At the end of the day, guys, do 2 things. 1, do your research and understand, what you need to do to stay healthy. What are some important factors? What are some common injuries? Number 2, don't be shy in the weight room. Don't be passive in the weight room. Like, I'm not telling you, you're thinking this fragile person. You need to get in the weight room, work on that muscle mass, work on getting faster, work on getting more explosive, train to be a better athlete. We're not saying the bench press is bad. We're doing Swiss bar bench press. So we're technically doing bench press at Laird training. We are pressing, but we're doing things in a safer, quote unquote, safer manner. Are we going to be completely safe? No. Any kind of working out is not completely safe, but are we doing things to help guys stay safer and help educate guys on what they should and shouldn't be doing? Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. I don't want to sit here and I look back and my shoulder was bothering me for weeks and weeks and weeks. And all of a sudden I felt that pop and it just got dramatically worse. This is the thing I want you guys to take away. The guys that have the highest strength, athleticism, the best athletes, those are the ones that have the highest risks of getting hurt. I look back at our South Alabama team from that 2010 team, and all the guys that got hurt in the weight room happened to be our best players. There were some of the great players obviously didn't get hurt, but there are guys that ended up getting hurt later on in their career. They were battling injuries, whatever it was. We've got to understand that the guys that throw, I don't want to say throw slow, the guys that don't have that maximum, high intent, maximum capability, high ceiling, they can bench press all day long and probably never get hurt. Mm-hmm. We've got to understand that if the high level athletes, right, have a high risk for injury, we've got to educate and we've got to teach them to make sure we try to keep them as healthy as possible. Is it going to prevent all injuries? No, but we've got to do our due diligence and make sure we're taking care of athletes and make sure we have those progressions, regressions, or alternative exercises if needed for certain players. That way we can make sure that we take care of them in the long run, guys. Adam, is there anything else you want to touch on before we roll out?
Yeah, I think just the big thing is just look at the long-term plans and look at, more importantly, I need to play more games and I need to get my bench press up. And that's what ultimately is going to mean checking your ego out the door and not being scared to admit you don't bench press or you do Swiss bar, you don't do straight bar, or, hey, when I do bench press, I'm not going to go up a lot of weight because I don't feel like I need to. And understanding that maybe will help you save and get you some more games under your belt and maybe get you from a high school level to a college level to hopefully a pro level one day.
Absolutely. And so, guys, in case you're wondering, we got guys that use a Swiss bar all the way up to 300 pounds and bench press like the world. Swiss bar is a lot harder than the barbell bench press. I will say that. And I actually believe this thought just came to my mind. The barbell bench press. Who decided that is the epitome for upper body strength? Like, who decided that, hey, the barbell bench press is the feat that we need to do? Is it powerlifting? Some guy 100 and some odd years ago? Conventional wisdom and what we have in our heads, to me, like an overhead press makes more sense to strong, stable person and transfer over to football and all these other sports. Like, don't fall into, this dogma way of thinking and worrying about the outside world. You're worrying about yourself. You're worrying about, your program. Build yourself into the ultimate athlete. Don't fall into, okay, I'm at this age, so I'm supposed to do this. Okay, guys, there's so much knowledge and so many things out there. We train a lot of guys. We get strong as hell from pressing. Okay, so I'm going to lead with that. We get strong as hell from bench pressing with the Swiss bar. You can get as strong as you need to get to play at a high professional level. Don't sit there and think that one exercise is going to make or break you guys. So until next time, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please leave that 5-star review if you enjoyed. If you really enjoyed it, make sure you guys share as well. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.